So as we prepare for our next guest, Governor Brown, I want to kind of bring us back to where we started. We've been through a discussion on the difference between reopening and recovery, and I think that the recovery element, while we need to work on our short-term things, this is also an amazing time for all of us leaders to be working on, what the next decade will look like, and we start that now. We have this incredible opportunity as a team to be creating generational change, and way beyond the next 10 years and the next couple decades, but things that people will talk about 30, 40 years from now from remember that time. And there will be a difference between who does it well and who doesn't. And I think we have this opportunity for all of us around the state to maybe make some amends from the past, but then also build an amazing opportunity for our future. We talked about shared prosperity and the discussion, that really leads with the three components. The first component of grow, create, and attract good jobs, not just creating jobs, but good jobs, and really being mindful of how we're doing that and working together. I see a lot of people running off doing what they think is right, but are we thinking about it under the guidance of an entire business plan? Number two, under shared prosperity, is to help workers transition to jobs of today and tomorrow. I think, re-educating, reforming our workplace, new skill sets, understanding that what was in the past doesn't work anymore, and rethinking our future and doing it now. I think the point was made earlier about if we wait too long, we'll be behind again. And I think having that urgency to move and to get together and do things, there's never been a better time to do it, and we've been talking about it in business now for the last 4 or 5 months, that now's the time for change. If you had things that you wanted to do, if you had things to create new opportunities, now's the time to make that happen. And then the third component, really, which is a full public-private partnership, is this investment and reform institutions that support economic mobility. I think that the need for a modern safety net, affordable housing, and addressing that, the reimagined education system, and how we think about training our kids in the workforce of the future and the needs for that is so exciting to me. It's not challenging in any way. It's about taking that challenge on and being excited for the future. And then finally, a just and effective criminal justice system. I think the amount of work and discussion that's gone into the last 60 days related to all things around social reform, I think is another exciting time for us to act on it and make moves, again, for the betterment of our future and the world that our kids will live in. And I think that we have a great chance to set them up for the future. So as we think long-term about business plan, as I mentioned, we'll have about 4 sessions ahead that will build upon each one of these topics that ultimately will bring forward a decade-long business plan that we'll unveil in December. We encourage you to participate. We've asked a lot of you already to participate in listening sessions in rural economic opportunities, in coastal economic opportunities, in metro region economic opportunities, and what are the things that it's going to take. We've listened to hundreds of leaders so far, and we'll listen to hundreds of more as we create those audiences to make those things happen. So the idea behind that is to get as much feedback as we can across public and private sector and build for the future, and understand that the issues in Brookings, Oregon are going to be different from the issues in Enterprise, which will be different from the issues in Sandy, which will be different from the issues in Wilsonville and Portland. So let's make sure that we bound together to make sure that we take care of our state, but also take care of the communities and the different levels of economic impact that they've had so far, not just in the last 4 months, but the things that also led up to put them in the situation that they're in today. With that being said, we're waiting for our guest, and I'm sure she'll be here any minute. And why don't we just take a moment, or you can just listen to me talk for the next 5 minutes. Okay, great. Governor Brown, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon.
Welcome to the Oregon Business Plan Summit. We have revised this now to a 4-session online system that's including leaders across our state. So as good people do, we had to pivot. So we're in pivot mode, and we thank you for joining us and being part of the session. I know it's been a very busy day. So we have talked about, just to set this up, we've talked about the difference between reopening and recovery, and how reopening is really focused on the short term. Recovery is really looking at the next day. We've also really set the table with our headlines around shared prosperity, as it relates to jobs and incomes, as it relates to falling inequalities, and rising intergenerational wealth. So when you think of headlines as far as where the Oregon Business Plan is looking for Oregon to go over the next decade, that's the framework of work that we're working from, and excited and work with several public and private entities to start to inform the work that we look forward to coming out with full-time in December of this year. So thank you for joining us. I've got a handful of questions for you, and can't wait to hear what you have.
Let's jump right in then.
All right. Well, when we met in December, way back in December of 19, we didn't see this coming. No governor can anticipate the challenges that might arise. You thought your job was hard until it got harder. However, few would expect to face simultaneously a health crisis, an economic crisis, and a racial justice crisis. How would you assess our progress? And how do we best work together to get through this crisis and on a path to a brighter, more prosperous Oregonian future?
Thanks, Joth, and I'm just delighted to be with all of you today. I would say, generally speaking, Oregon has weathered this crisis better than many other states, in part due to my administration's early and aggressive action, but also, frankly, the fact that Oregonians were willing to make tremendous sacrifices. We have, relatively speaking, low infection numbers and relatively low hospitalization rates. Obviously, the crisis is not over by any stretch of the imagination. The two other pieces that you mentioned, let me talk a little bit more about COVID. I know that individual Oregonians are really stepping up to wear their face coverings, wash their hands, physical distancing from other Oregonians to prevent transmission of the virus. But it's so important that we really double down on these efforts over the next couple of weeks, because we're hoping, schools are going to start in the fall, but it's going to look very different. The school year is going to look very different than it normally is. We're probably going to see a variety of education in classroom in some districts around the state, model both comprehensive distance learning and, of course, maybe some districts all distance learning. The hybrid obviously being some in classroom and some distance learning combination. So it's really critically important, honestly, if we want to ensure that all of our kids get a good education, that Oregon step up over these next few weeks and help us get the transmission rates down. I've taken a number of actions in the last couple of weeks, from enhancing our mask orders to restricting social gathering. But I am really, really concerned that, from an economic standpoint, it's going to be really challenging to issue more restrictive guidelines on Oregon businesses. So, that's COVID. We're doing well, relatively speaking, but certainly have challenges ahead, particularly with regards to getting kids back in schools. Secondly, you mentioned the economic crisis. I would say we're in the midst of a quadruple bind at the state level. Tax revenues down, obviously with businesses struggling. I would call it an economic suppression as opposed to a recession. Number two, we are seeing an unprecedented public health crisis that requires, frankly, significant investments. Number three, the social safety net. We have families across the state that are in dire need. And the fourth is, obviously, unlike the feds, the state of Oregon has to balance our budget. So you will see us coming into special session in August. I've worked with the legislative leadership to come up with a series of cuts but these are going to be challenging. I can't say every time we make a cut like this, Oregonians, families will be impacted. And so your partnership in supporting this effort is very much appreciated. I think the third piece on the economy, or the second piece on the economy from my perspective, is the recovery aspects. And I think we are in better shape than most states to come out of this pandemic stronger than ever. The lesson for me, honestly, was when I came into office in 2015, and Oregon was just beginning the recovery, or we were in the recovery efforts from the Great Recession. But as I looked around, we still had a lot of families struggling, particularly in our communities of color, our tribal communities, and our rural communities. And from my perspective moving forward, and I know you've been talking about this already today, I think it is so key that we put these communities at the center of our recovery efforts, that we center the voices of Brown, of Black, and African American, and Native Americans in our recovery efforts, and that we listen and learn from these folks about how we can create an economic recovery that really benefits all Oregonians. And then lastly, I will just mention a little bit about the racial justice work that we're doing in my administration and in partnership with the legislature. I would just take issue with one thing that Craig said. I do believe the last special session was successful. They worked, Republicans and Democrats worked together and passed a number of bills, at least 5 enhancing police accountability and tackling issues of transparency in law enforcement. I would just say that as we move forward, I am going to be creating a forum to ensure that we are centering the voices of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people at the center of our work. And that means, frankly, both in terms of my budget as we're developing my budget for the 21-23 biennium, and also in terms of a legislative agenda. And your partnership would be much appreciated in that effort. This recovery is going to be, this is the a most unique economic circumstance. It is a most unique time for Oregon, and I think it's so important that every organization, every business, every corporation, every small business figure out how we can develop Oregon's economy in the future in ways that will support Black-owned, Native American-owned, Latinx-owned businesses, and literally focus on building a better Oregon for everyone. And I think that is only work that we can all do together. So I look forward to working with all of you on that.
Well, thank you for that. That is, I think that's all music to our ears, and we look forward to working with you as well. So many places to take our questions here, and I'll go with the second one on just, from the beginning. I think that, we really appreciate and thank Sandy as well for the work that you did to allow construction, manufacturing, essential businesses, and really I think you were mindful on how you listened and were helpful to maintain the level of economy that we were able to keep during this time, especially with safety of mind of our employees and of our customers. It was super important. But now that we start to kind of look to next phases here, how do we think and work safely to bring back as much economic activity as possible, kind of wind our way out of this recession? I know it's going to take a while, but what are some of your thoughts?
I'm like, okay, I'm unmuting. My thoughts, I have a lot of them. I've had a little bit of caffeine today, so I'll try and keep it relatively straightforward. Certainly, there's a lot of tension right now throughout Oregon in terms of, should we be shutting down businesses? Should we not be shutting down certain businesses? A number of our neighboring states have shut down or really limited access to bars and restaurants. In California, I think they moved them outdoors. I I think for me, we're continuing to make decisions based on science and data. And at least at this point in time, what we are seeing is that the vast majority of businesses are really taking this safety protocol extremely seriously. And I honestly, I just need that to continue, or we're going to be back in the position of having to shutter the economy or button down the economy again. And I don't want that to happen. And so again, I mentioned earlier, it's the 3 W's, continue to watch your distance, wear your face covering, and of course, wash your hands. So each one of us can really make a difference, and we are truly all in this together. But I think these decisions get harder when you take into account 2 major factors. Number 1, fear, and number 2, resources. And I certainly have been having conversations with a lot of Oregon business owners, frankly, from producers in our agricultural sector to fishers and brewers. And, what I hear from them is that their workers are scared to come to work or scared to come forward if they feel sick or they're exposed. They don't want to take time off unnecessarily and don't understand that we, frankly, have the ability to provide a teen reimbursement fund. And so they are absolutely afraid to go to the doctor, and they're afraid if they take a test, they're going to be branded, I'll call it a scarlet C for COVID, which could impact their ability to get work, in future seasons, depending upon what that particular work is. So my team and I are absolutely working very hard with OLCC, OSHA, the Oregon Health Authority, and business owners like yourselves to keep workers safe and provide them with the resources they need to take time off if they need to get expedited testing, and frankly, to find isolated places to quarantine safely. And we need business owners to create a workplace culture that supports safety procedures and where everyone understands that getting tested and reporting illness keeps Oregonians going back to work. So I hear concerns from the business community about transparency around workplace outbreaks, hurting their reputations. I hear you. I just don't see a way of putting that genie back in the bottle, and I certainly encourage your individual businesses to speak out to say this is an issue. Again, we are all in this together. No state is, I would say no state is an island, but Hawaii obviously is. And they have the ability to really limit access. It's more challenging for a state like Oregon that's truly interconnected. So I'm counting on our businesses to foster an environment that encourages Oregonians, workers to stay both safe at home if they're sick, to stay on the job, to not go work on the job if they're not feeling good. And I don't know if it's like something as simple as a number of days without illness tally to our business heroes who've gone above and beyond with our requirements about both educational information and safety protocol. But I'm open to ideas and suggestions, happy to hand out medals or whatever it takes to get people excited about complying.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think creating a trusting environment of reporting and knowing that it actually helps everybody, then it does hurt. And so speaking of that and the workplace, there's been a lot of discussion around liability reform and some concern over businesses, schools, nonprofits, agencies for liability as businesses reopen or choose to have certain standards in place. What are your thoughts and your support around liability reform legislation and kind of how you think that's going to shape up?
So I think this may be hard for all of you to believe, but I know that Congress is going to be tackling this issue in August, maybe the end of this month. And so I am hopeful that they will certainly examine this issue and move forward. I also think at the state level, it's critically important that we look at these issues. I think we need to make sure that consumers feel safe when they're out shopping, and we need to make sure that workers feel safe going to work. And we obviously need to make sure that our business owners have the confidence to invest in the future of their business and the future of Oregon. So in terms of liability, I think as the virus continues to evolve, we're going to see some challenges. And I know that the legislature left a couple of issues on the table during the last legislative session, and this is one of them. I know that that there's a work group happening on that particular issue. But Joth, I have to be honest with you. I know that this is a really challenging issue. I do think there's probably room to both increase consumer confidence and protections for businesses who are following all of the guidance, but might face lawsuits filed by customers who walk in and then walk out and might come down with COVID later. I think these claims might be difficult to prove in court, but certainly they are very costly to defend. So I know the legislature is working on that, and I'm hoping they can get something, an agreement before the August special session. But I also think we have to, if we are going to sort of deal with it comprehensively, we're going to have to address what's going on in workers' comp. And I know that there are insurers in Oregon who are denying COVID-19 related workers' comp claims without an investigation, and I think that's just wrong. I had the opportunity to speak with grocery store clerks last week. I don't know how many there are in the state of Oregon, but over 80 of them have COVID-19. And I don't think these folks should have to go through a costly appeals process just to get a fair hearing. I do know that SAFE is getting this right, and I know one approach would be to use SAFE as a model. So I think these are issues that are not easy to resolve, but I do think that by having folks be at the table and work together, I think we can get there on all of these issues.
Great, thank you for that. Super important, and we look forward to this fall. I want to be mindful of time that we have together. I think we have you for a few more minutes, and I want to skip ahead to our last question and think a little bit about the future. We know we're all focused on today and the issues of today, but really beyond pandemic, the business plan is calling out the need for broad changes in economic development strategy, focusing on importance of shared prosperity. As you think ahead, and I'm sure you have quite a bit, what are some of the most important changes that we should be making to shape our state for a brighter future? What can we do right now? Because really 10-year clock starts today to work together to achieve it.
So as I said earlier, I think it's absolutely critical that we restore what I call a sense of justice and equality of economic opportunity in our state. I think it's critically important that all Oregonians feel like they have value, and that they can participate not just in their government, but that if someone wants to start a business, that they have the ability to do that. And I think that is really key to giving Oregonians hope for the future. As I mentioned earlier, we are working on a new forum to tackle these issues, and it's not going to be easy here in Oregon. We have a lot of history that I think has really haunted us, and I think it's so important that we all decide that we are going to do everything we can to eradicate racism from our culture, from our institutions, and from our systems. As I said, it's not going to be easy. I know that our African American Oregonians, our Latinx Oregonians, our rural Oregonians, they cannot wait any longer. They need our help now. So a great example, I think, of our ability to work together has been the partnership on expanding rural broadband. It was a great bill to get passed in the last special session. It's truly a lifeline for our rural communities. And I think the pandemic has shown that we have a long way to go in order to get every community, every household, every school signed up for broadband. I also want to thank you and your teams for your willingness to come to the table and talk about really difficult issues. OBI, OBC are all very well served by your amazing professional staff, and I want to thank you for your ongoing partnership. I think this is an incredible test of our will as Oregonians. We have made unthinkable and tremendous sacrifices. Many Oregonians have had to grieve the loss of a loved one. We know that hundreds of thousands are out of work, and businesses across the state have literally shuttered to protect public health. And we saw a bold investment by the federal government earlier in this crisis. I think without a doubt we can say that it helped many families that would have been kicked to the curb without that additional federal resource. But without further bold action, I'm just concerned that it will delay economic disaster. I think Sandy McDonough called it a sugar high. So in terms of the path ahead, three things. Number one, making sure the Oregon Health Plan is strong and ready for the fight against COVID. Number two, it's getting our kids back in school, unfortunately, even if it has to be in a Zoom room. And number three, I think about what my friend Tom Chamberlain says to me, and he said, the best path out of poverty is a good paying job. And I think it is so critically important that we all work together to build a better Oregon for everyone. I know we can do this. We are Oregonians. We are tough. We are resilient. We are creative. We are innovative, and look forward to a strong partnership as we move into, hopefully, the recovery phase.
Excellent. Governor Brown, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for all your work in keeping Oregonians safe, and we look forward to building to where we're going for the future.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.